experiencing that even tonight. Let's have a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, as one great preacher said many, many years ago, as a preacher, I am nothing more than a dying man standing in front of dying people. But God, you use this dynamic. You're the one that commanded it to preach the word, to be instant in season, out of season, to reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. God, help me to do that tonight. Lord, would you once again help me to connect to this congregation? Lord, would you help them? Would you help them to connect to the speaker? And Lord, all because we want to love you more. We want to understand your word better. We want to obey it. At least I hope. And so, God, I pray that you would use this message tonight. Lord, it's very graphic, but it's right where we live. Help us to be humble and be reminded that you exalt the humble. You give grace to the humble. You resist the proud. Lord, may we be humble with your word tonight. In Jesus' name I ask it. Amen. You may be seated. I love, as you probably have noticed, I love to preach successive messages on the same text. I think you get more out of it that way. And so for those of you that weren't here last night, we started looking at a text found in Ephesians chapter 4. In Ephesians chapter 4, you have a very practical chapter that Paul is just kind of letting the rubber meet the road, as it were, when it comes to Christian behavior. He gives all kinds of doctrine in chapters 1, 2, and 3. And as his fingerprint was when he would write, he would do the application in the second part of the letter. And so that's what we're doing here tonight. We're looking at chapter 4 where he's giving us practical application. And remember last night, friends, we established the fact because we looked at a picture called that of a soldier. And I reminded you last night that all of you, even you ladies, are fighters. You're soldiers. And we have been called to please him as soldiers because he's the one who's called us into his army. If you're not ready for a fight, if you're not looking for that fight spiritually, you're not the right kind of soldier. You're not in God's will. He wants you to fight. Who do we fight? Well, we talked about two enemies. One enemy is the devil, but remember, the devil is not omnipresent. I think that most of you will probably never have to be confronted by the devil. The devil wants to go after big game. I said that last night, remember? In fact, I told you if I were the devil, I would go after the leadership. I would even try to create a system that would distract Christians and make them lukewarm. And I think I've done a good job. It's called Hollywood. It's called the fashion world. It's called the system of the world. Oh, it's so attractive. And it's caused lots and lots of Christians to be lukewarm, which is exactly, if I'm God's enemy, where I want his people. So I think I've done a good job. But my friend, as I said last night, I think that you've got a bigger enemy than the devil. There's no question, folks, please don't get me wrong. There's no question that the devil hates you. He hates this church. He hates what you're doing. He hates this revival. But I think you've got a bigger enemy than the devil. And we looked at that enemy last night there in Ephesians chapter 4, starting in verse number 22. And remember, I've plopped you right down in the middle of a sentence. We will look at the whole sentence tonight as this message develops. But I dropped you at verse 22, and could I start reading there again? You follow along as I recite, all right? It says there in Ephesians chapter 4, and verse 22, he says that ye put off, and remember that word put off there literally means to take off clothing, but it's talking about your mind, about your heart. That ye put off concerning the former conversation or lifestyle, that's what the word conversation means, that you put off concerning the former conversation, the old man, which is, please say the next word out loud. And remember what that word meant last night? We got very graphic, didn't we? But that word corrupt means decaying flesh. It's a very, very offensive word. But we need to remind ourselves that that's what God thinks of anybody unsaved. They are corrupt. They're decaying flesh. They can't go to heaven. But let's read on, shall we? Which is corrupt according to the deceitful lust, the end of verse 22 says. Then you come to verse 23 that says, and where does all this happen? Where's your battleground, Christian? And be renewed in the spirit or the attitude of your mind. It's all in your head. The biggest enemy you've got, my friend, is in your head. As Winston Churchill once famously said in the middle of World War II to the country of England, he said, we have met the enemy and the enemy is us. He was trying to challenge them to get on the right side in their mind and not be defeated. And my friend, I want to do the same thing to you tonight. You are a fighter. It's a fight that you can win, but it's a fight that's in your head. Your fight is not the drinking age of California. Your fight is not Republican or Democrat. Your fight is right there in your head. And then you come to verse 24 that says, and that ye put on the new man, which after God is created in righteousness and genuine or true holiness. So friends, let me do something tonight. Let's just pretend. Would you put your pretend caps on? Just for the sake of illustration, let's just pretend that your church platform is your mind. All right? The church platform is your mind. I'm going to walk into your mind tonight, friends. Let me just stand in your mind. Now let's just pretend I'm in your head. The Bible tells you that in your mind there is a closet. Everybody here's got it. This closet is a walk-in closet. It's got billions of clothing in it that you can wear at any given split second of every moment that you're awake. This closet has a door that you have to go through. Over the door, it's called the old man. And when you walk into this closet and everything you wear in here, the Bible says is corrupt. Everything about that closet absolutely stinks. It is offensive, and you hate it if you're the right kind of Christian. But when you got saved, God continued to create. He created the universe in 6 days, and then he rested on the seventh, and on the eighth he started creating again. And every time somebody gets saved, God gives them a brand new walk-in closet. It's on this side of your mind. There are billions of clothing that hang in here. It's got a door that you walk through, and it's got a title over the door called the new man. And my friend, you were given this closet. None of us deserve it, but we were given this closet the split millisecond that you got saved. But when that happened, Christian, you didn't lose this closet. You got this closet and you've got this closet. That's what Ephesians chapter 4 and the sister passage of Colossians 3 is talking about. Every one of you has an old man closet. You've got a new man closet. Ladies, you're so included. We've all got these two closets. And Paul tells us in Galatians chapter 5, for the flesh, that's another name for that closet, for the flesh lusteth against the spirit. That's another name for that closet. And the verse goes on and says in Galatians, and the spirit against the flesh. These are contrary one to the other. In other words, they absolutely hate each other. Ladies and gentlemen, may I suggest to you in a humorous sort of way that every one of you here are really bipolar? In the truest sense of the word, you are bipolar. You've got that new nature pulling on you, you've got that old nature pulling on you, and you decide which garment you're going to wear. It is the biggest fight you've got. But I'll remind you tonight, Christian, that when you and I start wearing what's in this closet, oh, and the world makes it look so wonderful. All the beautiful people are in this closet. All the parties and all the great time they would have you think is all about this closet. But when you wear this closet, my friend, you stink. You smell. You're offensive to God. This closet will always cause divorce. This closet will always cause you to be a bad employee, a bad student, a bad friend, a bad neighbor. It always robs you of joy and peace and happiness. But when you got this closet, everything in here, when you wear it, brings contentment. It brings joy. It brings peace. It makes you a better wife. It makes you a better husband. It makes you a better church member. It makes you a better employee. It makes you a better neighbor. That closet has nothing but blessing in it. This closet has nothing but curse in it. And the biggest battle you've got, friend, is which closet are you going to? What are you doing in your mind? How embarrassed, as we said last night, how embarrassed would you be if that lovely screen that's new in your auditorium came down and on there we could see all the clothing that you wore today? How self-conscious would you be? My friend, that is the biggest fight you've got. Biggest fight. And I'm going to say something very offensive. but I need to. Some of the ugliest Christians, some of the ugliest Christians I've ever seen are retired. Are all retirees ugly? No, that's not what I said. My point that I'm making, my friend, is that even though here tonight you may be in your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, your 80s, your 90s, you never grow out of this dynamic. Even though you're 80, you still have that closet alive and well and kicking. And friends, it bothered the Apostle Paul so much that he cried out in Romans, "Who will deliver me from this body of death?" It always ruins you, my friend. It always, as James chapter 1 says, bringeth forth death. And my friend, you are the one who decides. It's all what's going on in your head. Do you hear me, ladies? Do you hear me, men? You are the fighter. You're the one in control. You're the one responsible. God's given you everything you need in His Word, in prayer, in good Christian fellowship. And as we provoke one another to love good and good works, God has given you everything you need to be a wonderful fighter, a wonderful soldier. How you doing? But friends, here's the problem. Paul wanted you desperately to know how that closet works. Why? So you could fight it better. He desperately wants you to know how your old nature works, people. So he gave you some very vivid information. And I'd like you to see what he says about that closet. So you leave this auditorium tonight better educated as to how to be a good soldier. You're going to get some Pentagon information, some CIA information about your. And Paul gives it to you. Are you ready for this? Starting in verse 17. That's kind of the beginning of this section, kind of the beginning of this sentence, if you will. Now, there are a couple sentences in the whole paragraph, but stay with me. Ephesians chapter 4, and I want to start looking at verse 17. Put your seatbelts on, folks, because Paul pulls no punches. He gives it to you right in your snot locker because he desperately wants you to understand how that old nature works. Would you watch this, please? Watch this. Let's start reading in verse 17. Everybody with me? All right. If you're alive, would you say amen? All right. Did that hurt? Feel free to do it again then. All right. Verse 17. Look what he says. This I say, therefore, and testify in the Lord. What Paul's saying there, folks, is, hey, what I'm about to give you is not my opinion. It is straight from heaven. What is, Paul? Well, let's read on. This I say, therefore, and testify in the Lord, that ye, who's ye, Christians, that ye henceforth walk not or live not as other Gentiles walk. And how do the other Gentiles walk? In the vanity or emptiness of their mind. Would you look at me, please? I need to explain something to you. Let me tell you what Paul has just said. What he hasn't said is that anybody unsaved is stupid. That is not what he has just said. Unsaved people can be brilliant. They're geniuses. Einstein never got saved. He was Jewish, a brilliant man. What Paul is telling you is that unsaved people are not stupid. What he is saying, however, when it comes to spiritual life, when it comes to godly information, when it comes to doctrine, when it comes to searching for God, the unsaved never get it. Everything they think when it comes to religion, when it comes to knowing God, when it comes to understanding doctrine, everything an unsaved person thinks is absolutely vanity. It's empty. It's useless. Let me give you an example. I enjoy watching the Discovery Channel. Now, it always bothers me when they talk about the earth being billions of years old. I mean, that is so stupid, but that always bothers me. But I enjoy watching it. I've learned a lot from the Discovery Channel. But I remember for a while, and some of you might remember this, about a year ago, the Discovery Channel started advertising a program, a series that they were going to run on the Discovery Channel called In Search of God. It was narrated by that world-famous actor by the name of Morgan Freeman. And what Morgan Freeman was doing is he was taking a crew all over the world, examining all the religions he could get his hands on, and they were looking specifically at that religion and trying to figure out, where is God? Which one has the answer? I did not watch a single episode. Let me tell you why. Because I already know what was going to happen. They were going to go everywhere searching for God except the only place you can find Him. They were going to go everywhere. And I knew that no matter what they did, folks, no matter what Morgan Freeman did, he's not a dumb man, he's brilliant. But no matter what he did in that program, he was going to come up with the wrong answer. He can't help it, folks. He's a Gentile. In verse 17. You know what that word Gentile means? Did you read it, by the way? Did you hear Gentile? You know what that word Gentile is? The Greek word for Gentile there is the same word that we get our word ethnic. The Greek word is ethnos. We get our word ethnic from it. People, listen to me carefully. This is so good to say in California. Are you aware of the fact that God is a racist? God is a racist. In God's eyes, there are only two races. Only two. Saved and unsaved. That's it. He doesn't see black, he doesn't see white, he doesn't see red, he doesn't see pink. He sees saved, unsaved. Two races. And so what he is saying by the word Gentile there, my friend, in your King James Bible, that word Gentile simply is referring to anybody on the face of this planet that doesn't know Jesus Christ. And so everybody who doesn't know Jesus Christ, when they're searching for God, they're always going to come up with the wrong answer. Are you with me on that? Does everybody understand? Now watch this. Because of that, because their minds are vanity when it comes to God's information, verse 18 is always true. Let's read verse 18. It's very offensive. Watch this. Verse 18. Pastor, this is the verse you and I were talking about the other night in the car. Verse 18, he says, talking about the pagans, the ethnos, the race, okay? The race of unsaved. Verse 18. Having the understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them because of the blindness of their heart. So friends, four things that always describe somebody unsaved. Their understanding is darkened, they're ignorant, they're blind, and they are, what one am I leaving out, Pastor? Understanding darkened, they're aliens, they're blind, and they're what? Ignorant. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that. Ignorant. That's one I forgot because I'm ignorant. Ignorant. All right, now, folks, listen. I would recommend the next time you people go on visitation. Oh, and by the way, time out. I think you still do visitation, don't you, Pastor? You guys go door to door sometimes? Not much. That is the number one method of politicians. I have a friend who's a pastor who's running for state senate in Boston. And he told me the number one political outreach is going door to door. It still works. But anyway, if you're talking to somebody unsaved, maybe you're witnessing to them, maybe you knock on a door, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a neighbor, I would recommend that you not use this approach. Sir, ma'am, I'm just here from Faith Baptist Tabernacle, and I just want you to know that you are ignorant, your understanding is darkened, you're blind, and you are, what is, aliens, thank you. I keep forgetting the four, aliens. Folks, that's probably not the best technique. Probably not the best technique. However, if you did, you would be right. You're just giving the truth. And maybe the person's such a hard head, maybe that's the approach you need to take. Ignorant, blind, understanding darkened, and alien. That's everybody unsaved. Folks, I have just described the United States. They're ignorant, they're blind, their understanding is darkened, and they are aliens. Wow. And so because of that, people, because of that, verse 19 always happens. Verse 19, people, is always the direction of a mind of somebody unsaved. Would you look at it with me, please? What a graphic verse. Verse 19. Watch this. Verse 19 says, who being past feeling, means they have no conscience. You following along in your Bible? Who being past feeling, have given themselves. Nobody made them. This is what they want, friends. This is what they want. You with me? Have given themselves over unto, please say the next word out loud. Lasciviousness, to work all uncleanness with greediness. They never get enough. That's what greediness means. They never get enough. Never get enough of what, Christians? Lasciviousness. Americans, have I just described your country or what? What in the world is lasciviousness? Lasciviousness is probably best described in America as just being sexy. All about being attractive. All about attracting the opposite sex. All about the next conquest. Folks, I realize right now I'm selling ice to Eskimos. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Sex, they say. Sex sells. That's why when you're selling toothpaste, there's always a gorgeous babe. When you're selling a car, there's always a gorgeous babe. When you're drinking alcohol, there's always gorgeous people. It's all about the next conquest. Folks, that's what the unsaved mind, that's what that closet, that is always, folks, hear me, I'm giving you Bible truth. That is always the direction that closet always goes. Every society throughout all the history of this world has always gone sexual the further they get away from the truth. That's what Paul's telling you. So my friend, none of you should be surprised at how raunchy your country's getting. I'll tell you why. That's the only closet they got. They can't help it. They can't help it. Many years ago, when I lived and was growing up in Seattle, my parents bought their very first home. I was in third grade, and they bought a home in a subdivision called Camelot. This multi-million-dollar developer built hundreds of homes, starter-type homes, 3-bedroom, 1 bath, 2-car garage homes, all over. It's just a huge area, and the whole subdivision was called Camelot. I went to Camelot Elementary School. That's a whole nother story. But right in the middle of this huge subdivision was a small, just a couple acres, a small farm, where this farmer, this owner, had said to these multi-million-dollar developers, no, you may not have my land. No. So they built this huge subdivision all around this little farm. For some reason, and I've never asked my dad why, and I need to remember this. But for some reason, my mom and dad bought one of the homes directly across the street from that farm. So that when I was sent to my room, which happened a lot, when I was sent to my room, which was in the front of the house, I could rest my little elbows on the windowsill, and I could watch life on that farm. Let me tell you about this farm. It was kind of an unusual farm. This guy had some unusual animals. I don't know why. I have no idea. I never really got to know them. They were kind of strange. But they had a whole gaggle, a whole flock, a whole herd. I don't even know the right terminology, nor do any of you. But he had a whole gaggle of peacocks. Just gobs of peacocks. And I used to watch these peacocks. What a dumb bird, people. These things would walk around the yard, pecking at the ground, eating slugs. There are a lot of those in Washington. They're kind of a garbage bird. And they call the females peahens. They call the males peacocks. Well, the peacocks have a fanny full of feathers that normally just drag on the ground. And these things are walking around, And folks, I don't know why, but in the middle of the night at 3 in the morning, it's nice and still and peaceful, and for no reason you'd hear, could never find my dad's .22. He always hit it. But I used to watch those peacocks. And every now and then, actually quite often, one of these peacocks would decide, hey, I want to be married. And he would take his fanny full of feathers and he'd go, and this beautiful spray of these long feathers, about this long, they're gorgeous and hard to pluck. But he would this beautiful fan of feathers, and he would strut. He'd walk around the yard, check me out. And I guess God made the female, the peahens, to look at that and go, whoa. That is husband material. If I've ever seen husband material, I want some of that. Yes, please. And folks, I used to watch that, and I used to do exactly what you're doing right now. I would laugh. How stupid. That's barnyard behavior, right? Right? Well, folks, I saw the same thing. I went to my local high school. I went to my local shopping mall. I turned on my TV. I saw the same thing. Guys wearing their shirt unbuttoned down to their navel, 3 chest hairs hanging out there, walking around, check me out. And these silly, foolish women of all ages showing flesh on Facebook, showing flesh at the mall, showing flesh at the, check me out. People, do you understand? That's barnyard behavior. They can't help it. Do you remember, Bible students, how verse 19 started? How did it start? Look at it. How did it start? Who being past what, church? Feeling. Look at your Bibles. Who being past what? What does that mean? They have no conscience. They don't feel bad about their mini skirts. They don't feel bad about posting their bikini pictures on Facebook. They don't care who sees it. They don't care about their chest hair hanging out there. They don't care about that next conquest. They're proud of it. They're proud of it. And some of you crybabies are dumb enough to try to participate. I don't understand that. That is so not that closet. That closet hates that, people. It hates it. It's one of the ways you know you're saved. I hate that kind of behavior. I don't want to be sexual. I don't want to have barnyard behavior. It stinks in the nostrils of God. That's what verse 19 says. But ladies and gentlemen, would you please say out loud when I count to 3? Would you please say out loud the very first word of verse number 20? Verse number 20. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. You know what that means? On the other hand, unlike verse 19, in contrast, let's flip the coin, Paul is saying. And what does verse 20 say? Let's read on, shall we? You follow. But ye have not so learned Christ, if so be ye have heard him and have, I forget how it ends. Let me find it here. If so be that ye have heard him and have been taught by him as the truth is in Jesus. Now, would you look at me? Let me just Shrock eyes. Verse 20 and 21. You know what Paul's saying? Hey, Christians, the world's out there. They're all doing it. They're all doing their peacock thing. They're all doing their strutting. They're all about the next conquest. They're all about having a sexy mindset and a sexy focus. They're all doing it. But not you. You know better. You're not ignorant. You're not aliens. Your understanding isn't darkened. You're not blind. You see through that junk, that garbage, that corruption, that dead flesh. Do you understand that? Man, is that graphic. Friends, so Paul is telling us, you're not like that anymore. Oh, that used to be you. May I remind you, who did Paul write this letter to? The believers at Ephesus. Do you remember what Ephesus was like? Everybody in this church was into that peacock lifestyle before they met Jesus Christ. But now that they've met him, they were to be entirely different. And my friend, so are you. So are you. The biggest battle you've got, my friend, is killing the flesh. Killing that. As Paul says in Colossians 3, mortifying. That means to kill. You hate that closet. You hate it. If you're the right kind of Christian, if you're the right kind of soldier, if you're the right kind of fighter, if you're one who pleases Him, as 2 Timothy said about a soldier, you absolutely are constantly annihilating, bayoneting, if you will, shooting that closet. And all about putting on that closet. But friends, I wonder how many of you here tonight are like a young man I heard about. It's a true story. A young man, 19 years old. Any of you 19? Any 19-year-old? Anybody 19 back there? You're 19? Raise your hand high. I want everybody to see you, okay? That's a 19-year-old, okay? About that age. A 19-year-old, about that age, who lived in, interesting enough, my home city, Seattle. Had a hot car and a girlfriend that lived way far away. And he wanted to see her over the weekend. And it was a Thursday, and he realized he had no money, he had no gas in his tank, and he thought, what in the world am I going to do? And he got the bright idea that just up from where he lived, just up the street from where he lived, was an RV park. Do you know an RV? There's one park right back there. A whole park of those things. And he thought, you know what? Tonight, I'm going to take a 5-gallon gas can and a siphon hose and go up there and steal some gas. Now, ladies, listen to me carefully. In order to understand this illustration, you need to understand something. In order to siphon something, I'm an authority on this because my wife always had me clean the aquarium. You get a hose and you stick your hose into the source you want to take from. You take the other end of your hose and you suck on it like a McDonald's straw. That will start a flow. You always get a little bit in your mouth. But if you're a real man, you just kind of spit it out, and immediately when that flow starts, you put it into the receptacle you want it to flow to, and because the flow has already started, it keeps flowing. It's kind of fun. Well, this guy was good. This 19-year-old was good. Got a gas can and a nice hose and snuck up there and found a good victim. The owner of the victim never even knew he was there. Stuck his hose in and did that siphon process. The next morning, the owner of that RV woke up, walked out into his campsite, and there was this 19-year-old body in his campsite. Unconscious. He went over, tried to revive him. He couldn't. He thought, good grief. He called 911, and an ambulance rushed out, and the police rushed out, and they took by ambulance this body to the hospital. And the article said they were barely able to revive him, but they did. And when he came to and they had him revived, the police started to interview him. And here's what they learned. Ladies and gentlemen, an RV always has at least 2 tanks. One for the fuel and one for the toilet. He stuck his hose down the wrong tank. Is that not gross or what? You are aware, aren't you? And I don't mean to be too graphic, but you are aware, aren't you, that human waste gives off a methane gas that has literally killed many, many people over the years. This kid just about died trying to siphon the wrong tank. I like how the article ended. The article ended with the police asking the owner of the RV, "Sir, would you like to press charges? He tried to steal from you." The owner just chuckled and said, "No, we're good. He got his comeuppance. We're good." I like that word, comeuppance. Good southern word. But my friends, I tell you that incredibly despicable story because what a picture of you. Every one of you that are saved here tonight, and I hope it's all of you. You got 2 tanks. You got 2 tanks. What are you sucking on? What's your music like? What's your entertainment like? What tank are you going to? What do you like? This is so good. This is so good. This is so bad. This always brings death. It always kills. This does not. My friend, what a fight you've got. David Brainerd. Have you ever heard that name before? It's very famous. He was a missionary to New England Indians. There were gobs of them up there in the 1700s. David Brainerd had a rich ministry to those Indians. Thousands of them got saved. One particular Indian that got saved was the chief of the tribe. A leader. Great example. David Brainerd, people, was teaching this principle because this is great theology. He was teaching this to those Indians. And the chief came up to him, who was pretty sharp, after the service and said, Mr. Brainerd, Brother Brainerd, I think I got it. Brother Brainerd, what you're telling me is that in my head, I've got a black dog and I've got a white dog. These two dogs are constantly fighting. They constantly hate each other. They're always fighting. And whichever dog I feed is going to win the fight. That's great. What a great illustration. That's exactly what God's trying to tell you tonight, my friend. Who's winning your fight? What are you feeding on? What tank are you sucking on? I will close with this, but don't get excited. It's going to take me a while. I'm a marathoner. I don't know if I hadn't come to your church yet to tell you this, but I told a lot of churches when I was about to turn 60 that when I did turn 60, I was going to run a marathon. When I turned 59, I started training for a marathon, which means that what you do when you run a marathon is one day a week, instead of doing your 3 to 5 mile run, you do like a 7 mile. And you do that for a couple weeks, and then you increase it to 9 miles, and then you increase it to 11. And what you want to do before you run a marathon is to be able to run 3 20-mile runs. And you're probably ready to finish a marathon. You won't run a fast marathon, but you're probably in shape enough to finish. And that was my goal. I ran my first marathon when I was 34. And I decided I wanted to run another one when I turned 60. So I started training when I was 59, and 1 week to the day after my birthday, as I turned 60, I ran the Charleston Marathon. I chose Charleston because not only was it close to my home, but it's also incredibly flat. I ran those 26 miles, 385 yards, and the first thing I said to my little wife as she was waiting for me at the finish line, the first thing I said to her was, Lori, never again. Just about killed me. But I'm telling you this, friends, because I want you to know what happened to me. When I was 34, I decided I was going to run a marathon. And I decided that I was going to run a marathon the first weekend of October in Vermont, which means I was doing 16 and 18-mile runs in August. I sweat a lot. I don't know if you've noticed that. I sweat easily. I sweat a lot. I'm hot stuff. That was a joke. And I would get out there. I usually ran my long run on Thursday, and I would get out there, and I would get to mile 1. I am covered with presbyteria. I would get to mile 5. Everything is soaked with presbyteria. Are you with me? I'd get to mile 10, even my shoes are going squish, 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 squish. I'd get to mile 15, I'm leaving a slime trail. I mean, it's gross, folks. I'd get to mile 18, I'm finally home, and I'm just absolutely a sweaty, grimy, gross mess. And I hadn't seen my wife for 3 to 3.5 hours. I missed her, and I always wanted a hug, but I could never find her. And she wouldn't touch the stuff that I'm wearing. She wouldn't touch it. Gross. So let me tell you what would happen. And I know I'm going to do a TMI. Too much information, but you put up with it anyway. I'd get into the house and I'd be done with that 3-hour run. Oh, folks, you've never experienced thirst. Never. After you've run 3 hours solid without stopping in the August sun. And I was doing it in Connecticut where there's a lot of humidity. I'd get in there, and I always had a 2-liter bottle of Mountain Dew chilling in the refrigerator. I would grab that 2-liter bottle and kill it like you would a 12-ounce can of soda. Yeah, it gave me a sugar high, but it was worth it. And I would cool off. Oh, it felt so good to be home and have that behind me. And I would go up to the master bathroom, and I would take that T-shirt off. and I would wring it out and leave a huge grimy puddle in the bottom of the bathtub and put the t-shirt on the floor. I'm going to take care of it later. I won't make my wife handle it. I would then take my shorts off, wring them out, another big puddle. I would take my socks off, wring them out, more puddles. Folks, we're talking gross. And some of you are looking at me like, oh, I'm so glad you're doing that. Keep doing it. So there's a grimy pile. I would then get into the shower, and it felt so good, people, to get clean again. Oh, it felt so good. And I would soak for 15 minutes, 15 hours. I would soak. Felt so good. I would then get out of the shower, dry off, and about from me to pastor in my home is an armoire that my wife had specially built for me that's got all kinds of clean stuff in it. My wife is a registered nurse. She wants things clean. She will not let me wash the dishes because I never get the water hot enough. She's a clean freak. And it's waiting for me. It's fresh. She uses Downy. Smells good. I can't wait to get it on. However, in my mind, I look down at that gross pile. And in my mind, I think, hey, there's more of me in there than there is in here. And I was fast, and I looked good, and I was a man. And so I reach over, and I take that t-shirt, wet, clammy, smelly t-shirt. I put it back on. I reach over and get those running shorts, and they're lined, and put them back on. Those socks. Am I grossing you out? Am I grossing you out? I sure hope so, because you know what I've done? I've just described all of you. I've just described every one of you. That thing is so smelly. It's so stinky. It always brings death. It smells. But yet, how guilty are we even today? Oh, but I just love their music. I just love their internet sites. I just love what they have to offer. I mean, they make it look so, and they're also, they look so happy. They never advertise the rescue mission, do they? They never show you the wino that's in the gutter. They never show you the broken marriages. They never show you all the suicides that happen daily. My friend, you've got two closets. The biggest fight you've got, the biggest enemy you've got, that one right there. You've all got it. You've all got it. How you doing in your fight? Would you bow your heads?